My fellow Americans, on Saturday, at my direction, the United States successfully concluded an airstrike in Kabul, Afghanistan that killed the emir of al-Qaida, Ayman Al-Zawahiri. Now, justice has been delivered, and this terrorist leader is no more.
And that was US President Joe Biden addressing the nation and the world to announce the leader of al-Qaida and one of the masterminds of the 9/11 attacks had been killed in a US drone strike. Ayman Al-Zawahiri was killed over the weekend at a safe house in the Afghan capital of Kabul. US officials say Al-Zawahiri was on the balcony of a house when a drone fired 2 missiles at him. Washington says nobody else was killed or injured in the operation, adding that a family member was present nearby at the time but was unharmed. This is the first strike ordered by the US in Afghanistan since that chaotic withdrawal of troops in August of last year. The Taliban has slammed the strike, calling it a violation of the Doha Agreement that it signed with the United States. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has responded, saying in a press release, and I quote, "By hosting and sheltering the leader of al-Qaida in Kabul, the Taliban grossly violated the Doha Agreement and repeated assurances to the world that they would not allow Afghan territory to be used by terrorists to threaten the security of other countries." Al-Zawahiri was an Egyptian doctor who succeeded Osama bin Laden as the leader of al-Qaida. He had a $25 million bounty on his head. He also helped to coordinate the September 11th attacks that killed nearly 3,000 people in New York City in 2001, amongst various other planned attacks, as referenced by President Biden in his remarks at the White House.
For decades, he was the mastermind behind attacks against Americans, including the bombing of the USS Cole in 2000, which killed 17 American sailors and wounded dozens more. He played a key role in the bombing of the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, killing 224 and wounding over 4,500 others. He carved a trail of murder and violence against American citizens, American service members, American diplomats, and American interests. And since the United States delivered justice to bin Laden 11 years ago, Zawahiri has been a leader of al-Qaida, the leader. From hiding, he coordinated al-Qaeda's branches and all around the world, including setting priorities for providing operational guidance that called for and inspired attacks against U.S. targets.
Democrats and Republicans on Capitol Hill have both praised the Biden administration for the strike. Former President Barack Obama also tweeted about the operation, calling it a tribute to Biden's leadership. The leaders of Saudi Arabia, Australia and Canada have also backed Washington for the strike.
The United States successfully.
All right, joining us live for more on this story is Anas Malik, who is in Islamabad. He was actually in Afghanistan when the Taliban took over Kabul last year. Anas, thanks very much for joining us. Just give us some background on al-Zawahri and how significant is his death?
Well, it's very significant, Giles, for various reasons. Zawahiri rose to the ranks of al-Qaeda for being somewhat what was called an extremist or a hardliner. He'd been in the business of jihad, and I would use the word business for jihad for the past 40 years. From Cairo, then joining al-Qaeda in 2001, and immediately rising to the ranks of advisor, very senior advisor to Osama bin Laden, to the point that any decisions that Osama bin bin Laden took was directly in consultations with Ayman Al-Zawahiri, including the 9/11 attacks of 2001. So that goes on to signify on how important Zawahiri was. But there were challenges during his leadership of al-Qaeda for the past 11 years when he had taken over the of al-Qaeda. Then the biggest challenge rose was of the Islamic State, and if you compare the literature of Islamic State, they would practically be making fun of Ayman al-Zawahiri and his leadership, and in fact they would the IS literature goes on to praise Osama bin Laden. So that was a challenge on how to maintain that chain of command, that unity. On the other hand, Zawahiri did something good for the organization as well, and that's what the jihadis consider as good, because al-Qaeda rapidly expanded under his watch, be that be in West Africa, be that be Al-Shabaab, the Niger groups, the African groups, or the decentralizing or making groups in the subcontinent such as the AQIS or the Al-Qaeda in Indian subcontinent. So by and large, this is a bigger blow for the unity of the group, because that uniting factor, that person who was close, who was considered close to their ideological head, he's no more. Giles?
And Anas, you referenced the emergence of the so-called Islamic State as well as al-Shabaab in some parts of Africa. It's still early days, of course, but what does all of this mean for al-Qaeda's operations in different parts of the world?
Well, it will take a hit, at least for some time being. And one of the major reasons was that Ayman Al-Zawahiri was losing his importance over the time. He was becoming redundant, A, because he was old, and then B, he was delivering far too longer sermons, 8 hours lectures, 7 hours lectures. So they were, as I said, the Islamic State, their literature was literally making fun of Ayman Al-Zawahiri. But at least for the time being, following this killing or this assassination, following this killing, for the time being, Al-Qaeda's operations will be at a halt until they elect a new Amir or a new leader. And for that, the strategy would be something that will be very keenly watched out, because what Zawahiri did was to decentralize the Al-Qaeda structure. Previously, under Osama bin Laden, everything or every attack that Al-Qaeda carried out was by the approval of bin Laden himself. But when Zawahiri took over for the past 11 years, he made smaller groups, and he said that this is the ideology. If you comply with this ideology, then you are independent and you are endorsed into carrying out an attack of your own. So at least for the time being, until a new leader is elected, that's until when we will be seeing a hit to Al-Qaeda's operations. But then, as and when a new leader is elected in the next 2 months, 3 months, probably lesser, then we can probably see an uptick in the attacks, for one reason, for the decentralization of the terror organization that Zawahiri had done. Giles?
Yeah, we'll be watching very closely in the coming weeks to see who emerges as the new leader. Thanks for that, Anas. That was Anas Malik reporting live for us from Islamabad. Now, for some more analysis, we're joined by Avital Leibovich from Jerusalem. She is the director of the American Jewish Committee. Thanks very much for joining us. Just give us a sense of what the reaction is where you are in Jerusalem to al-Zawahri's death.
Well, I would say that overall it was a congratulatory kind of reaction, actually congratulating America for the biggest achievement, for this very major achievement, big achievement. And when you look a little bit deeper, you see that there are some similarities between the way that al-Zawahri was taken out than what we have here in terms of attacks here. For example, your reporter mentioned that indeed he was a doctor who became a terrorist after a while. And this brings me to the point that actually in the world of today, you can't really identify a terrorist as a prototype of a specific prototype. They can be doctors, they can be academics, they can be family owners, they can be 15 years old, they can be 60 years old, they can be poor, they can be rich. So this is one point I'd like to make in connection. And the second one, which is also, I think, relevant to the region, but also for India, is how critical it is to have a very good source of intelligence, because Zawahiri was on the radar of the American forces for a very long time before they found the right moment to eliminate him. And it has nothing to do with, with a very good kind of mechanism in the army or the best kinds of jets or anything of that sort. Intelligence is key, especially in this region when you're working in order to eliminate terrorists.
And you mentioned the role of intelligence in this operation. I just wonder what you think this strike says about the US presence in both Afghanistan as well as the Middle East, the wider region, in terms of the fact that this comes almost a year to the date since that pullout of US troops from Afghanistan, that decision by US President Joe Biden.
Right, it's a great question, Giles. Well, we just completed 2 weeks ago a visit by President Biden here in the region. And one of the key messages of President Biden that I'm sure a lot of Arab countries heard, but even the terrorist groups heard, and they did not like this message, was that the US is here in the region, it's very much present in the region, and is here to stay. And I think that the Zawahiri attack yesterday just demonstrated that this was not only a saying, but it was practical. Now, we have a tendency to interpret the American presence only in terms of defense or military presence. But there are other forms of presence of the American nation, and that is investments, that is different kinds of NGOs who are working here, UN bodies, USAID. So in other words, I think we should look at the whole picture and not only on defense issues. And another thing that I think was quite significant to this region, which the American did get a decision on, was to move Israel into the Central Command from the European Command. Central Command is the American command, which actually enjoys the presence of many Arab countries. So in the past couple of months, Israel is exercising alongside Arab countries. And as you can imagine, we do have some mutual interests here in the region. So this is all done under the American umbrella. Therefore, the American presence in the region is very well felt and on the ground, even if you don't measure it by the number of boots.
All right, thank you very much for that analysis. That was Avital Leibovich joining us live from Jerusalem with some analysis there on the US drone strike against the leader of al-Qaida, Ayman Al-Zawahiri.